The dust settled around Clara Whitmore's worn boots as she stood in the center of Redemption's main street, her father's hand gripping her arm like a vice. 20 men with rifles surrounded them, half from the Whitmore Ranch, half wearing the silver stars of Marshal Colt Brennan's deputies. The air tasted of gunpowder and rage, thick enough to choke on. "This ends one of two ways," her father snarled, his weathered face twisted with desperation. "Either my daughter marries the marshal, or this town burns tonight. Brennan killed my eldest son, and blood demands blood." Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Her brother had been a rustler, a drunk, a man who'd put a gun to an innocent shopkeeper's head. Marshal Brennan had done what the law required, but her father saw only injustice, and his grief had poisoned half the territory against the lawman who'd brought order to this God-forsaken stretch of Montana. Before we continue with Clara and Marshal Brennan's story, I'd love to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It truly means the world to us and motivates us to bring you more quality content like this. Also, I'm curious, where are you listening to this story from today? The marshal himself stood 30 feet away, a tower of controlled fury in black leather and steel. Colt Brennan was legend, the man who'd cleaned up 3 territories, survived 14 gunfights, and never once compromised his code. At 32, his body was carved from relentless pursuit of justice, broad shoulders stretching his duster coat, hands steady as bedrock over his twin Colts. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, a souvenir from the Comanche Wars, and his eyes held the gray stillness of a winter dawn. "I won't be threatened into matrimony," Brennan said, his voice carrying across the street with quiet authority. "And I won't see innocent blood spilled because one man can't accept justice." "Then prepare for war," Whitmore spat. "By midnight, every man loyal to my family will ride against you and yours. This territory will run red." Clara felt the words tear from her throat before thought could stop them. "I'll do it." Every head turned. Her father's grip loosened in shock. "I'll marry him," Clara continued, her voice gaining strength even as her hands trembled. "To stop this madness, to save this town from tearing itself apart." She met the marshal's steel gaze across the distance. "If he'll have me." The silence stretched like a rope about to snap. Brennan's jaw tightened, a muscle working beneath sun-bronzed skin. He studied her with those penetrating eyes, not with lust or possession, but with something deeper, measuring, assessing. "No woman should be offered to prevent a war," he finally said, each word deliberate as a bullet chambering. "But if Miss Whitmore consents of her own free will, without coercion—" He paused, and something almost gentle crossed his hard features. "Then I'll speak vows before God and this town. Not because I'm threatened, but because I see a woman worth more than being a bargaining chip." Clara's breath caught. In that moment, she understood why outlaws feared him, not for his guns, but for the unwavering principle that burned behind those gray eyes. Her father released her arm, satisfied he'd won. But as Clara walked across that dust-choked street toward her future husband, she felt the strangest sensation. Not dread, but possibility. Marshal Colt Brennan watched her approach with respect in his gaze, not triumph. He extended his hand when she reached him, an offer, not a claim. "The choice is still yours," he said quietly, for her ears alone. "Say the word, and I'll face whatever comes. You're not property. You're a person." Clara placed her palm in his. His hand engulfed hers, rough with calluses and old scars, yet impossibly gentle. "I choose to stand with you," she whispered. "But I need you to know, I'm not doing this just to stop bloodshed. I'm doing this because I'm tired of being powerless in a world that treats women like livestock. If I'm going to marry anyone, better it's a man who just called me a person worth more than a bargaining chip." The corner of Brennan's mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but close. "Then we'd best make this official before your father changes the terms again." The wedding happened within the hour, presided over by the circuit preacher, with half the town crammed into the small church. Clara wore her mother's faded blue dress, her only piece of finery. Brennan stood rigid in his marshal's blacks, but when he spoke his vows, his voice carried none of the coldness she'd expected. "I vow to protect you, Clara Whitmore," he said, his gray eyes locked on hers. "Not as property, but as a partner. I vow to listen when you speak, to respect your choices, and to never raise my hand to you in anger. Whatever trials come, we'll face them together." The word "together" resonated through her chest like a church bell. Clara repeated her own vows, her voice steady despite the surreal nature of marrying a stranger. But when Brennan slipped a simple silver band onto her finger, "His mother's ring," he murmured, she felt the weight of genuine commitment. The kiss was brief, respectful, but Clara felt the controlled strength in the way his hand cupped her cheek. This was a man who knew violence intimately, but chose restraint. Outside, her father's men dispersed with grumbles, but no shots fired. The immediate threat had passed. Clara was now Mrs. Colt Brennan, wife to the most relentless lawman in 3 territories, and she had no idea what came next. Brennan's home sat on the edge of town, a solid timber house with a wide porch and corrals for his horses. As they walked the dusty path in twilight silence, Clara noticed the care in the property. Neat fences, a vegetable garden someone tended with patience, curtains in the windows that suggested this wasn't just a bachelor's crash space. "It's not much," Brennan said, opening the door for her, "but it's secure. Strong walls, good sight lines. Nobody approaches without me knowing." Clara stepped inside to find a surprisingly warm space. Hand-woven Navajo rugs covered pine floors. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, already crackling with flames someone had built in preparation. Books lined shelves beside a worn leather chair. This was a home, not just a fortress. "The bedroom's through there," Brennan continued, his tone carefully neutral. "I'll take the front room tonight, give you privacy to adjust." Clara turned to study her new husband. In the firelight, his features softened slightly. Still hard-edged, still dangerous, but human. Tired even. She noticed the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders that never fully released. "You didn't want this any more than I did," she said softly. "No." Brennan removed his hat, revealing dark hair touched with silver at the temples, despite his relative youth. "But wanting and needing are different animals. This territory needs peace more than it needs my preferences." His gaze met hers with startling honesty. "I'm sorry you were put in this position." "Are you sorry you married me specifically?" Clara asked, surprising herself with her boldness. "Or just sorry about the circumstances?" Something flickered in those gray eyes. Surprise, perhaps even respect. "I'm not sorry I married you, Clara. I've watched you around town these past months. You help Mrs. Chen with her English lessons. You read to blind Tom every Sunday. You're strong in ways that matter." He set his hat on a peg with deliberate care. "I'm sorry you didn't get to choose better circumstances. Choose better than me. You assume you're not worth choosing, Clara observed. Brennan's jaw tightened. I'm a killer. Legal, sanctioned, necessary. But a killer nonetheless. I've got 14 dead men on my conscience, and likely more to come. That's not what young women dream about in husbands. Clara moved closer, close enough to smell leather and sage, and something indefinably masculine. I'm 24 years old, Marshall. I stopped having dreams a long time ago. I've watched my mother die of fever, my brother spiral into criminality, my father descend into bitterness. What I want now isn't dreams. It's reality. Honest reality. She lifted her chin. Are you an honest man, Colt Brennan? To a fault, he replied, his voice dropping lower. Which means I'll be honest with you now. I've been alone 5 years by choice. Lost someone once, and I promised myself never again. I'm not good at softness, comfort, the things women need. Maybe I don't need softness, Clara countered. Maybe I need strength. Maybe I need someone who sees me as an equal partner, instead of a fragile thing to be sheltered and controlled. Brennan studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression, a wall beginning to crack. Your father will test this arrangement. He'll push, probe for weakness. If we're going to make this work, make people believe this is real, we need to be united. Completely. Then we start now, Clara said, teaching me to be your partner, truly. Over the following weeks, an unexpected rhythm developed. Clara woke before dawn to find Brennan already in the corrals, working his horses with patient expertise. She learned he had 3, a massive black stallion named Justice, a dappled mare called Mercy, and a young paint he was training named Hope. You named them after virtues, Clara observed one morning, leaning against the fence with coffee steaming in her hands. Reminds me what I'm supposed to stand for, Brennan replied, running a brush along Justice's flank with long, sure strokes. Easy to forget in this work. He glanced at her. You ride? Not well. Ladies aren't supposed to ride anything but side saddle, and my father couldn't afford proper lessons. That's foolish. Out here, a woman who can't ride can't survive. Brennan whistled softly, and Mercy trotted over. She's gentle but smart. We'll start today. The riding lessons became Clara's favorite part of the day. Brennan was a patient teacher, correcting her posture with careful hands, explaining balance and communication with the horse in terms that made sense. When Mercy spooked at a rattlesnake and Clara nearly fell, Brennan caught her with reflexes like lightning, pulling her against his chest as he soothed the mare with low words. Easy, easy, he murmured, and Clara wasn't sure if he was talking to her or the horse. His arm was iron around her waist, his heart hammering against her back. You're safe. I've got you. The moment stretched. Clara felt the coiled strength in his body, the restraint that kept all that power in check. When he released her, his hands lingered a heartbeat longer than necessary. Sorry, he said gruffly. Instinct. Don't apologize for keeping me safe, Clara replied, slightly breathless. After riding came shooting lessons. Brennan set up targets behind the house, tin cans on fence posts at various distances. He handed her a Colt Navy revolver, smaller than his massive 6-shooters, but still substantial. A gun isn't about being aggressive, he explained, standing behind her to adjust her grip. It's about being prepared, about equalizing a fight when someone bigger and stronger comes at you. His breath stirred her hair. Aim for the center mass. Squeeze. Don't pull. Breathe out before you fire. Clara squeezed the trigger. The recoil jolted her arm, and her shot went wide. Brennan's hands covered hers, steadying. Again, trust yourself. They practiced until her arms ached and 3 cans lay perforated in the dirt. Brennan's rare smile appeared. Small, but genuine. You're a natural. Few more weeks. You'll be able to defend this house if I'm out on patrol. Is that likely? Clara asked, a strange flutter in her chest at the thought of him in danger. Always possible. Brennan reloaded her weapon with practiced efficiency. I've made enemies. Men I've arrested, their families, outlaws who want my reputation. They know attacking me head-on is suicide. So, he met her eyes. They'll come at me through anything I care about. The implication hung between them. Through anything I care about. Did that include her? As if reading her thoughts, Brennan continued. You didn't ask for this life, but you're my wife now, which makes you a target. I need you able to protect yourself when I can't be here. His expression hardened. I need you to promise me something, Clara. If trouble comes and you have to choose between saving yourself and saving me, choose yourself. Always. You understand? That's not how partnership works, Clara replied firmly. You don't get to make decisions about my life without me. Brennan's jaw worked. I'm trying to keep you alive. And I'm trying to be worth keeping alive as something more than a protected pet. Clara set the gun down with deliberate care. If we're equals, Colt, then treat me like one. That means accepting I might choose to stand and fight beside you instead of running. The use of his first name, she'd been calling him Marshall or Brennan until now, made something shift in his expression. Vulnerability flickered across his hard features before he locked it down. You're braver than I gave you credit for, he said quietly, and more stubborn. I learned from the best, Clara replied with a small smile. The domestic routine developed depth. Clara cooked, but Brennan often helped, moving around the kitchen with surprising competence. They ate dinner together each night, conversations gradually extending from practical matters to deeper territory. She learned he'd grown up in Texas, lost his parents to cholera, joined the Rangers at 16. He learned she'd taught herself to read from her mother's Bible, dreamed of becoming a schoolteacher before poverty made that impossible. One evening, as Clara washed dishes and Brennan dried, their hands brushed in the soapy water. Both froze. The touch was electric, innocent, but charged with weeks of growing awareness. Brennan's fingers curled briefly around hers before he pulled back. Sorry, he muttered. Stop apologizing for touching your own wife, Clara said, more sharply than intended. The tension between them had been building, looks that lasted too long, accidental contact that sent heat racing through her veins, nights lying awake, knowing he slept just beyond a thin wall. Brennan set down the towel with controlled precision. I'm trying to be respectful. You didn't choose this marriage freely. I won't assume rights I haven't earned. Clara turned to face him fully, water dripping from her hands. What if I told you that you've earned more than you think? That this arrangement has become something I don't want to just endure? His gray eyes darkened, pupils expanding. Clara. Her name was a warning and a prayer. Don't say things you might regret. I don't regret them. Her heart hammered wildly, but she held his gaze. I don't regret you. The moment shattered as pounding erupted on the front door. Brennan's gun was in his hand before the second knock fell, his entire demeanor shifting from conflicted husband to deadly lawman in a heartbeat. Stay behind me, he ordered, moving toward the door with lethal grace. It was his deputy, Tom Fletcher, bleeding from a gash across his forehead. Marshal, we got trouble. The Garrett gang hit the bank, killed 2 people, and took hostages. They're holed up in the old mission on the ridge, demanding you come alone or they start executing prisoners. Brennan's expression went cold as winter steel. How many hostages? 4, including Sarah Chen's little girl. Clara's blood froze. Sarah's daughter was only 8 years old, the same girl she'd been teaching to read. Brennan was already strapping on his gun belt, checking his weapons with mechanical precision. Gather the deputies. I want the mission surrounded, but nobody moves until I give the signal. He glanced at Clara, and for a heartbeat, the hard mask slipped. I have to go. I know. Clara grabbed his duster from the peg, helping him shrug into it. Be careful. Always am. But his hand caught hers. Squeezing briefly. Remember what I taught you. Anyone comes here who isn't me or Tom, you shoot first and ask questions never. Colt, his name caught in her throat. There were 1,000 things she wanted to say, none of which could fit into this moment. He seemed to understand. His free hand cupped her face, calloused thumb brushing her cheek. We'll finish that conversation when I get back, he promised, voice rough with emotion he usually kept chained. I swear it. Then he was gone, swallowed by darkness and duty. Clara spent the next 4 hours in agony. She tried to read, to sew, to do anything but imagine Colt facing down killers in that old mission. She checked and rechecked the gun he'd left her, making sure it was loaded and ready. Near midnight, gunshots echoed from the ridge, a rapid staccato that made her heart stop. Then silence. Terrible, endless silence. She was standing on the porch, gun in hand, when she saw the figures approaching. 2 men, carrying a third between them. Even in darkness, she recognized Colt's duster, the breadth of his shoulders, but he was leaning heavily on his deputies, one arm pressed against his ribs. Clara ran. Easy, Mrs. Brennan, Tom Fletcher said as she reached them. He's hurt, but stable. Took a bullet in the side, but it went clean through. The doc's at the jail tending to the hostages. They're all alive, thanks to your husband. They got Colt into the house, onto their bed, the one he'd never slept in, insisting on giving her privacy. In the lamplight, Clara saw blood seeping through his torn shirt, his face pale beneath his tan, sweat beading his forehead. Out, she ordered the deputies. I'll tend him. Ma'am, the doctor. We'll be busy for hours with 4 traumatized hostages. I can handle a bullet wound. Out, now. They left. Clara bolted the door and turned to find Colt watching her through pain-narrowed eyes. Bossy, he muttered, but there was approval in his voice. You're bleeding all over my clean sheets, Clara replied, hands already working to remove his duster, his vest, his blood-soaked shirt. I'm allowed to be bossy. Beneath the clothing, Colt's torso was a map of violence. Old scars layering upon older ones, muscles rigid with tension and pain. The new wound was a neat hole below his ribs, still seeping crimson. Clara fetched water, clean cloth, and the medical supplies Colt kept in a cabinet. This is going to hurt, she warned, threading a needle with steady hands, despite her racing heart. Just do it, Colt gritted out. I've had worse. Clara cleaned the wound with alcohol, feeling him tense beneath her hands, but making no sound. The bullet had indeed passed through. She could see the exit wound in his back, slightly larger, but equally clean. She threaded the needle and began to stitch. Tell me what happened, she said quietly, focusing on her work. Keep you distracted. Colt's voice came rough with pain. Garrett made the mistake of thinking I'd walk in alone and unarmed. I did walk in alone. But I'm never unarmed, he hissed as she drew another stitch tight. Had a derringer in my boot, a knife up my sleeve. Got the girl out first, snuck her through a window while I talked terms. Then it was just me and 3 killers. 3 against 1, Clara breathed, horrified. Go slow with the details. It hurts to imagine. I'll die before I let anyone hurt the people of this town, Colt said, echoing the words that had been running through Clara's mind. That's the oath I took. The Garretts learned what that oath means tonight. Clara tied off the last stitch on the entry wound and moved to his back, gently rolling him to access the exit wound. Colt's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. Not hard, but firm. I killed all 3, he said, his voice dropping to something raw and vulnerable. Shot them dead without hesitation. You need to understand what you're tied to, Clara. I'm not a hero. I'm just a killer who happens to be on the right side of the law. Clara met his gray eyes, seeing the haunted shadows there, the weight of 14 souls, now 17, all carried in those gunmetal depths. She placed her free hand against his cheek, feeling the rasp of his stubble, the heat of his skin. You saved 4 lives tonight, she said firmly, including a child I love like a niece. You risked your life to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. That's not a killer, Colt. That's a guardian. Something cracked in his expression, that careful control shattering like glass. His hand released her wrist, only to slide up her arm, pulling her down until her forehead rested against his. I was afraid, he confessed, words barely a whisper. For the first time in years, I was afraid. Not of dying, of not making it back to you, of leaving you alone in this world without, he swallowed hard, without telling you that this has stopped being an arrangement. You're not a bargaining chip. You're not a political solution. You're my wife, Clara, and I've fallen in love with you. Clara's breath stopped. Her heart, which had been racing, seemed to simultaneously stop and explode. I know I've got no right, Colt continued, his voice gaining strength despite the pain. I'm too hard, too damaged, too steeped in violence. But if you could find it in yourself too, Clara kissed him. It wasn't gentle or careful. It was months of tension, weeks of longing, days of fear erupting into desperate connection. Colt's good arm came around her, pulling her against him despite his wound, and she felt the restraint he'd maintained for so long finally, beautifully shatter. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara's eyes were wet with tears. I love you, she whispered, against his lips. I think I started loving you when you called me a person worth more than a bargaining chip. I know I loved you when you patiently taught me to shoot. I was certain when you walked into danger to save a child. You're not too hard or too damaged, Colt Brennan. You're exactly the man I need. His hand cupped the back of her head, fingers threading through her hair. I don't deserve you. Good thing I don't care about what you think you deserve. Clara smiled through her tears. Now lie still before you tear your stitches and make me regret marrying such a stubborn man. Colt's laugh was pained but genuine. Yes, ma'am. Clara finished tending his wounds with gentle efficiency, then settled beside him on the bed, their bed now, truly. Colt's arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her close despite the discomfort it must have caused his injury. I meant what I said earlier, she murmured into the darkness. We're partners, which means when danger comes, we face it together. Together, Colt agreed, and Clara heard the promise in that single word. The vow he'd made at their wedding, now infused with love instead of mere commitment. She felt his lips brush her forehead. Sleep, Clara. I'll keep watch. You're injured. I'll keep watch. We'll both keep watch, he compromised, and Clara heard the smile in his voice. Together. The weeks that followed tested them both. Colt recovered with frustrating slowness. Clara learned with gratifying speed. He taught her tracking, reading signs in dust and broken branches. She taught him patience, showed him it was possible to accept help without weakness. They hunted together, rode together, faced down her father's renewed attempts at manipulation together. When Whitmore showed up demanding to take Clara home, Colt stepped onto the porch with his hand resting casually on his gun. "Your daughter is home," he said quietly, but with absolute finality. "She's my wife by her own choice, and she stays by her own choice. You've got no claim here anymore." Clara appeared beside him, rifle held with comfortable competence. "He's right, Father. I chose this. I choose him every single day." Whitmore's face purpled with rage. "You'd choose this killer over your own blood?" "I choose a man who sees me as an equal partner," Clara replied, her voice steady as bedrock. "A man who has never once raised his voice to me in anger, who asks my opinion on every decision, who teaches me to be strong instead of keeping me weak and dependent." "Yes, Father, I choose him every single day." Something shifted in her father's expression. Defeat, perhaps, or the first crack of understanding. He left without another word. That night, as they lay in bed with moonlight streaming through the window, Clara traced the scar on Colt's eyebrow with gentle fingers. "Tell me about this one," she said softly. Colt caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Comanche warrior, 6 years ago. He could have killed me, but chose to scar instead. A mark of respect," his translator told me later. "Said I fought with honor." He met her eyes. "I think about that sometimes, about honor, and what it means to be a good man in a violent world." "You're a good man, Colt Brennan," Clara said firmly. "The best I've ever known." "I'm a work in progress," he countered. "But you make me want to be better. Make me believe I can be better." 6 months after their forced wedding, the preacher returned to redemption. Clara found Colt waiting for her on the porch at sunset, dressed in his formal blacks, a bouquet of wildflowers in his massive hand. "What's this?" she asked, smiling. "A do-over," Colt replied, extending the flowers. "I'm asking you properly this time. No threats, no coercion. Just me asking you, Clara Brennan, if you'll marry me again. For real this time. Because you want to, not because you have to." Clara's heart swelled. She took the flowers, their simple beauty, somehow more precious than any hothouse arrangement. "You're already my husband." "I know, but I want to hear you say vows when you mean them, when you choose them." His gray eyes held hers with that unwavering intensity she'd come to love. "Will you marry me, Clara?" "Yes," she whispered. "Today, tomorrow, every day for the rest of my life. Yes." The second ceremony was small. Just Tom Fletcher, Sarah Chen, and her daughter. A few trusted friends. Clara wore a new dress, simple but beautiful, sewn by Sarah as thanks for saving her child. Colt wore his marshal's blacks and his mother's silver cross. When the preacher asked if they took each other freely, their "I do" rang with absolute certainty. "I vow to love you," Colt said, his voice rough with emotion. "To respect you, to protect you without controlling you, to be worthy of the faith you've placed in me. I vow to see you not as property, but as the partner I never knew I needed. Whatever trials come, we'll face them together." "Together," Clara echoed, tears streaming down her face. "I vow to stand beside you, not behind you, to be strong when you need strength, gentle when you need comfort. I vow to remind you of your goodness when the darkness threatens to swallow you. I vow to love you exactly as you are, today and always. Together. The kiss was deep, claiming, full of promise. When they broke apart, Colt's thumb brushed away her tears with infinite gentleness. Mrs. Brennan, he murmured, and the name was a benediction. Marshall Brennan, she replied, and felt his smile against her lips. They walked home through Redemption's dusty streets, hand in hand, past buildings where families settled in for the night, past the jail where justice slept, past the church where vows had been spoken twice, once from necessity, once from love. On their porch, Colt lifted Clara into his arms, despite her laughing protests about his healed but still tender ribs. "Carrying you over the threshold properly this time," he explained, kicking the door shut behind them. "Doing this right." He set her down gently, and Clara pulled him into a kiss that deepened quickly. Weeks of gentle intimacy giving way to urgent need. Colt's hands framed her face like she was something precious and breakable, even as his kiss turned hungry. "Are you sure?" he asked against her lips, always careful, always seeking her consent. Clara answered by tugging him toward their bedroom, toward the life they'd built together from ashes and obligation, toward the future they'd chosen freely. As dawn painted the Montana sky gold and rose, Clara woke to find Colt watching her with those gray eyes, now soft with contentment. "What are you thinking?" she asked, tracing the scar through his eyebrow. "That I was offered to prevent a war," Colt replied, catching her hand and kissing her knuckles. "And I gained a wife who makes me believe in peace, real peace, the kind that comes from love, not just absence of conflict." Clara smiled. "I was offered to prevent a war, and I rose as the bride of the Wild West's most relentless lawman alive. But more than that, I rose as myself, strong, capable, loved." "Together," Colt whispered, pulling her close. "Together," Clara agreed. Years later, their story would be told in Redemption, how a forced marriage became the greatest love the territory had ever known, how a lawman learned that strength and gentleness could coexist, how a woman discovered her own power and chose to share it with a man worthy of the gift. They built an empire of sorts, not of land or wealth, but of justice tempered with mercy, strength balanced with compassion. Colt continued his work as marshal, but Clara rode beside him now, her reputation as a tracker and negotiator growing to match his. Together, they brought order to chaos, hope to desperation. When their first child arrived, a daughter with Clara's green eyes and Colt's steady disposition, they named her Grace, because grace was what had saved them both, what had transformed obligation into devotion, what had proven that even in the Wild West's harshest landscape, love could not just survive, but thrive. On quiet evenings, Colt would hold Clara on their porch as the sun set over the Montana hills, and she would feel his heartbeat steady against her back. No longer the controlled rhythm of a man holding himself in check, but the peaceful cadence of someone who'd finally found home. "Any regrets?" he'd ask sometimes, his chin resting on her head. "Only that I didn't shoot your hat off sooner to get your attention," Clara would reply, feeling his chest rumble with laughter. "You're a terrible shot. I'm an excellent shot. You're just too stubborn to admit I beat you last week. I let you win. You absolutely did not, Marshall Brennan. Prove it, Mrs. Brennan." And she would turn in his arms and kiss him, and no more words were needed. They had been offered to prevent a war, but they had chosen each other, day after day, moment after moment, building something neither violence nor circumstance could destroy. They had risen not just as lawman and wife, but as partners who understood that true strength came not from standing alone, but from knowing when to lean, when to support, when to simply hold on, and trust that together was always better than apart. In the end, the greatest peace redemption ever knew came not from a marshal's guns or a peacemaker's sacrifice, but from two people who proved that love, real, chosen, fought-for love, could heal even the deepest wounds and bridge even the widest divides. Together, always together. The winter of trials, the first real test of their marriage, came with the winter snows. Montana winters were brutal, but the winter of 1878 brought something worse than cold. It brought the Maddox brothers. Clara was in town collecting supplies when she heard the commotion. 3 men on horseback rode down Main Street with the casual arrogance of those who'd never faced real consequence. The leader, a massive brute with a scarred face and cold eyes, wore 2 guns low on his hips. "We're looking for Marshal Brennan," he announced to the street at large. "Tell him Jeremiah Maddox is here to collect a debt." Clara's blood ran cold. She'd heard that name before. Colt had mentioned it once, in the dark hours after a nightmare. The Maddox brothers, bank robbers, killers, the gang Colt had broken up 5 years ago in Kansas. He'd sent 2 brothers to hang and Jeremiah to prison for 20 years. Apparently, Jeremiah had gotten out early. Tom Fletcher appeared from the jail, his hand on his gun. "Marshal's out on patrol. Won't be back until sundown. You boys best move along." Jeremiah's smile was reptilian. "Oh, we'll wait. We've got all the time in the world." His eyes scanned the street and landed on Clara. Something in his expression shifted. Recognition, though they'd never met. "You must be the new Mrs. Brennan. Heard the marshal went and got himself hitched. Real pretty thing, ain't you?" Clara felt every eye on her. She kept her expression neutral, her hand steady on the basket she carried, though her heart hammered. "My husband will be happy to speak with you when he returns," she said calmly. "Until then, I suggest you wait at the saloon like civilized men." "Civilized?" Jeremiah laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Your husband killed my brothers, shot them down in the street like dogs. You call that civilized?" "I call that justice," Clara replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "They robbed a bank and killed 3 people, including a child. The law dealt with them accordingly." Jeremiah's face darkened. "The law? That what you call your murdering husband? The law?" He urged his horse forward, close enough that Clara could smell the whiskey on his breath. "I'm gonna give Brennan a choice. Either he faces me in the street at sundown, or I start killing people he cares about. Starting with you, sweetheart." Tom Fletcher's gun cleared leather. "That's enough, Maddox. Make that threat again and you'll hang before sunset." "Yours? You gonna arrest all 3 of us, deputy?" Jeremiah gestured to his brothers, both equally armed and dangerous. "Before we put bullets in half this town?" The standoff froze. Clara saw the calculation in Tom's eyes. He was good, but 3 against 1 were poor odds, especially with civilians in the line of fire. Clara made a decision that would either save lives or end hers. "I'll deliver your message to my husband," she said clearly. "He'll meet you at sundown in the street. Fair fight, witnessed by the town. You have my word." "Clara, no," Tom started, but she cut him off with a look. "Do I have your word, Mr. Maddox," Clara continued, "that if the marshal agrees to face you, you'll leave the townspeople in peace, regardless of the outcome?" Jeremiah studied her with something like respect. "You got spine, girl. Yeah, you got my word. Brennan shows up, we settle this man to man. He don't show? He shrugged. Then I burn this town to the ground and you with it. They rode to the saloon, leaving Clara standing in the street with her heart in her throat. Tom gripped her arm. What were you thinking? Colt will lose his mind when he hears you negotiated with Maddox. Colt will lose his mind when he hears Maddox threaten me, Clara corrected. This way we control the confrontation, and I need to get to him before sundown. She was already moving, heading for the stable where Mercy waited. Tom followed, protesting, but Clara was already saddling the mare with quick, efficient movements Colt had taught her. You can't ride out alone. It's not safe. It's less safe if Colt walks into this blind, Clara replied, checking her rifle and the revolver Colt had given her. Besides, I know where he's patrolling. The North Ridge, checking the boundary markers. I can reach him in 2 hours if I ride hard. She swung into the saddle, every lesson Colt had taught her, coming back with crystal clarity. Keep Maddox and his brothers in sight. Don't let them near the jail or any families. If I'm not back by sundown. She met Tom's worried gaze. Stall them. Do whatever you have to do. Then she was riding, pushing Mercy hard across the snow-covered plains. The cold bit through her coat, but Clara barely felt it. All she could think about was reaching Colt, warning him, making sure he didn't face this threat unprepared. She found him exactly where she expected, checking fence lines near the northern boundary. The moment he saw her riding hard, his entire body went tense, hand dropping to his gun before he recognized Mercy. Clara? He rode justice to meet her, concern etching his features. What's wrong? She told him everything in short, breathless sentences. With each word, Colt's expression grew harder, colder, until he looked like the legend people whispered about, the relentless lawman who never lost, never compromised, never showed mercy to those who threatened innocence. You should have stayed inside, he said, but his hands were checking her over, making sure she was unharmed. Maddox could have killed you on the street. He could have, Clara agreed. But he didn't, because I gave him what he wanted, a chance at you. And Colt, we need to talk about what happens next. His jaw tightened. What happens next is I face him at sundown and end this. He's fast, Clara said urgently. Tom says he's one of the fastest draws in 3 territories, and he'll have his brothers backing him up, no matter what promises he made. I know. Colt's voice was grim. I've faced him before. That's how I know he won't fight fair, no matter what he says, which is why you're not going to be anywhere near that street at sundown. The hell I'm not, Clara shot back. We're partners, remember? Together. You don't get to cut me out now. This is different. Colt gripped her shoulders, and she saw fear in his gray eyes. Real fear. Maddox kills people I care about. That's his pattern. He murdered the Kansas Marshal's wife and children before I hunted him down. I won't let him near you, Clara. I can't. Clara cupped his face in her cold hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance. But I'm not hiding while you face this alone. I'm your wife, Colt. Your partner. And I'm a damn good shot now, thanks to you. She saw the war in his expression. The desire to protect her warring with his respect for her strength, her choice. Finally, he exhaled hard. If you're going to be there, you follow my lead exactly, he said. No improvising, no heroics. We do this smart and we do this together. Understand? Together, Clara agreed, and felt him pull her close, his forehead resting against hers. I love you, he whispered. More than justice, more than duty. If I have to choose between being a hero and keeping you safe, I choose you every time. Then, let's make sure you don't have to choose, Clara replied. Let's be smart about this. They rode back to Redemption together, and on that ride they planned. Colt's tactical mind was sharp as his guns, and Clara added insights he might have missed. Sightlines, escape routes, ways to split the brothers' attention. By the time they reached town, they had a strategy. The sun was touching the horizon when Colt walked into the street. Clara was positioned exactly where he'd told her, inside the general store with a clear view through the window, rifle loaded and ready. Tom Fletcher and 2 other deputies were scattered strategically, looking casual but ready. Jeremiah Maddox and his brothers stepped out of the saloon. The street cleared as if by magic, townspeople vanishing into buildings or behind cover. "Brennan," Jeremiah called. "Wondered if you'd show. Thought maybe you'd run. Let your pretty wife face the music alone." "I'm here," Colt replied, his voice carrying across the empty space between them. "Let's settle this. Just like Kansas," Jeremiah agreed. "You ready to die, Marshal?" "Been ready for years," Colt said. "Question is, are you ready to join your brothers?" Jeremiah's face twisted with rage. His hand dropped toward his gun. Clara saw it all unfold in heartbeats that stretched like hours. Jeremiah's draw was lightning fast, his gun clearing leather with practiced ease. But Colt was faster. 2 shots rang out before Clara could breathe, and Jeremiah stumbled backward, red blooming on his chest. But the brothers were already moving. The younger one aimed at Colt's back, while the older swung toward Tom Fletcher. Clara's training took over. She braced the rifle against the window frame, exhaled, squeezed, exactly as Colt had taught her. Her shot took the younger brother in the shoulder, spinning him around and spoiling his aim. His bullet went wide, shattering a window instead of hitting Colt's spine. Tom's gun thundered simultaneously, dropping the older brother with a shot to the leg. It was over in seconds. 3 men down, none dead except Jeremiah Maddox. Colt stood in the center of the street, smoke curling from his guns, his eyes already searching for Clara. She stepped out of the general store, rifle still ready, and met his gaze across the distance. Relief flooded his features so intensely she saw his knees nearly buckle. Then he was moving, holstering his guns and striding to her with purpose. He caught her in his arms, rifle and all, and held her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You saved my life," he said against her hair, his voice shaking. "That shot, Clara, you saved my life." "Together," she whispered back. "That's what we promised. Together." The aftermath was complicated. The surviving Maddox brothers were arrested, their wounds tended before they were locked in cells to await trial. Clara gave her statement to a federal marshal who'd arrived too late to help, but in time to witness the cleanup. "That was some shooting, Mrs. Brennan," the federal man said, respect clear in his voice. "Most women would have fainted at the sight of a gunfight." "I'm not most women," Clara replied simply, "and I protect what's mine." That night, in their bed, Colt held Clara like she might disappear if he loosened his grip. His hands traced her face, her arms, as if reassuring himself she was whole and safe. "I've never been so terrified," he confessed in the darkness. "Not for myself, never for myself, but seeing you in danger, knowing I'd brought that danger to you." His voice cracked. "I'm not sure I can do this, Clara. Be a lawman and a husband. The two don't mix well." Clara caught his face between her hands. "The two don't exist separately anymore, Colt. You are both things, and I love both sides of you. The lawman who stands for justice, and the man who holds me at night." She kissed him softly. "I won't lie and say I wasn't afraid. I was terrified, but I was more afraid of losing you. of you facing that alone. You're too brave for your own good, he murmured. I learned from the best, Clara replied. Now stop thinking and just hold me. We survived. That's what matters. But as she drifted toward sleep, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Being married to Colt Brennan meant living with danger as a constant companion. She'd have to decide if love was worth that price. Looking at his face in the moonlight, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm, she knew the answer. It was worth everything. Shadows from the past. Spring came to Montana with violent beauty. Snowmelt rushing through arroyos, wildflowers exploding across the plains in riots of color. Clara was teaching reading at the small schoolhouse they'd built over the winter when the stranger arrived. She was a woman, which was unusual enough in Redemption, but she was a beautiful woman, which made heads turn. She wore a traveling dress of deep burgundy, her dark hair pinned in an elegant style, and she moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting what she wanted. She walked straight into the schoolhouse without knocking. I'm looking for Marshal Colt Brennan, she said, her voice carrying a southern lilt that somehow made even a simple request sound like seduction. They said I might find his wife here. Clara set down the primer she'd been reading from and stood. I'm Clara Brennan. How can I help you? The woman's eyes, a startling amber color, swept over Clara with an assessment that felt invasive. You're not what I expected, she said finally. I'm Delilah Whitfield. I need to speak with your husband about a matter of some urgency. Something in the way she said your husband made Clara's spine stiffen. The marshal is at the jail. I can show you. Oh, I know where the jail is, Delilah interrupted with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I know this town quite well. I used to live here, you see. 5 years ago, before, she trailed off delicately. Well, before circumstances changed. Clara dismissed the children early and walked with Delilah toward the jail, a sense of unease building with each step. The woman moved like a cat, graceful and predatory, and the way men watched her pass was different from how they looked at other women. There was history there, recognition. Colt was at his desk when they entered, reviewing wanted posters. He glanced up, and for the first time since Clara had known him, she saw him truly shocked. His face went blank, carefully neutral, but not before she'd seen the flash of something complicated in his eyes. Delilah, he said quietly, standing slowly. What are you doing here? Hello, Colt. Delilah's voice softened, became intimate. It's been a long time. The air in the room thickened with tension. Clara looked between them, reading the body language, the weighted silence. Her stomach nodded. Mrs. Whitfield was looking for you, Clara said, emphasizing the Mrs. deliberately. I'll leave you to discuss your business. Clara, Colt started, but she was already walking out, needing air, needing space to process whatever this was. She made it to the porch before Tom Fletcher caught up with her. Mrs. Brennan, you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. Who is she, Tom? Clara asked bluntly. Who is Delilah Whitfield to my husband? Tom's face showed his discomfort. That's probably something the marshal should tell you himself. Tom, Clara's voice carried command now, the authority she'd earned over months of standing beside Colt. I'm not asking as a curious wife. I'm asking as his partner. Who is she? Tom exhaled hard. She was Delilah Reed back then. Came to Redemption about 6 years ago. Caused quite a stir. Beautiful widow. Wealthy. Refined. She and the marshal? They were close. Real close. Everyone thought they'd marry. The knot in Clara's stomach tightened. What happened? She left, sudden-like, in the middle of the night. took everything valuable in her house, and disappeared. Marshall never talked about it, but he changed after that. Got harder, colder. That's when he made his reputation really. Threw himself into the work like a man with nothing left to lose. Tom met Clara's eyes. Until you came along. You brought him back to life, Mrs. Brennan. Don't let her take that away. Clara stood on that porch for a long time, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of blood and fire. She heard the jail door open behind her, heard Colt's familiar footsteps. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Yes," Clara agreed, not turning around. "We do." They walked home in silence. Clara could feel Colt's tension, the way he was choosing his words carefully. Once inside, she finally turned to face him. "Tell me everything," she said. "And please, Colt, don't try to protect me by lying or leaving things out. I'm strong enough to hear the truth." Colt leaned against the wall, suddenly looking every one of his 32 years. "Delilah came to redemption 6 years ago. I was different then. Younger, more open to the idea that someone like me could have a normal life. She seemed perfect, beautiful, educated, interested in building something here. We courted for 8 months. I was going to propose." Clara's chest ached, but she kept her expression neutral. "What stopped you?" "She did. I came home one night to find her gone. Took her jewelry, took money from the bank. Turned out she'd been slowly draining accounts all over town, forging signatures, stealing from people who trusted her. She left me a note." His jaw tightened. "It said I was too naive, too noble, too boring for a woman like her. That she'd never loved me, just saw me as a mark like everyone else." Clara breathed, understanding flooding through her. The walls he'd built, the careful distance he'd maintained when they first married, it all made horrible sense now. "I tracked her down," Colt continued, his voice flat. "Found her in San Francisco, with a gambler twice her age. She'd married him for his money, of course. I arrested her, brought her back to face charges. But her new husband had connections, paid off the right people. She walked free on a technicality, and I had to watch her leave again, knowing she'd never face justice for what she'd done. And now she's back," Clara said, "claiming someone's trying to kill her." Colt's laugh was bitter. "Wants my protection? Has the audacity to ask me to keep her safe after everything she did?" Clara moved to him, reading the turmoil in his gray eyes. "Do you still have feelings for her?" "No." The answer was immediate, vehement. "God, no. What I felt for her wasn't real. It was an illusion she created, a role she played. I mourned the woman I thought she was, not who she actually is." He caught Clara's hands. "What I feel for you is completely different. You're real, honest, strong. You see me as I am, flaws, violence, darkness, and you love me anyway. Delilah never knew me. She didn't want to." Clara searched his face, looking for deception, finding only raw honesty. "I believe you," she said slowly. "But Colt, if someone is trying to kill her, you can't just ignore that. You're a lawman. You took an oath." "I know." The conflict in his expression was painful to witness. "But having her here, around you, around our life? Clara, she's poison. She destroys everything she touches." "Then we'll be careful," Clara said firmly. "We'll investigate her claims, determine if the threat is real, and if it is, we'll handle it. Together. But we won't let her presence shake what we've built. She doesn't have that power anymore." Colt pulled Clara against his chest, holding her tight. "I don't deserve you." "You keep saying that," Clara murmured into his shirt. "And I keep proving you wrong." The next morning, Delilah appeared at their house just after dawn. Clara answered the door in her work clothes, ready for the day's chores, and found the other woman dressed impeccably, despite the early hour. "I hope to speak with Colt," Delilah said, her eyes flickering past Clara into the house. "The marshal," Clara corrected pointedly, "is having breakfast. You're welcome to join us and explain your situation properly." Delilah's perfect mouth tightened, but she followed Clara inside. Colt looked up from his coffee, his expression going carefully blank when he saw their guest. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said formally, "Clara said you have information about a threat. Let's hear it." They sat at the kitchen table, Clara pointedly at Colt's side, a united front. Delilah told her story. She'd been living in Denver, married to a wealthy mining magnate named Charles Whitfield. 3 weeks ago, someone had shot at her carriage. 2 days later, her hotel room had been ransacked. Then, her husband had been poisoned. He'd survived, but barely. The threats had continued, escalating, always targeting her specifically. "My husband hired private detectives," Delilah explained. "They traced the threats back to someone here in Montana, someone from my past." "Who?" Colt asked, his lawman's mind already working through possibilities. "They don't know." The trail went cold in redemption. "But Colt, someone from this town wants me dead, and I—" Her voice broke convincingly. "I didn't know where else to turn. You're the only lawman I trust." Clara saw the manipulation clearly. The trembling voice, the vulnerable expression, the way Delilah leaned slightly toward Colt. But she also saw something else, genuine fear in the woman's amber eyes. Whatever else was true, Delilah believed someone was trying to kill her. "We'll look into it," Clara said before Colt could respond. "The marshal will investigate the claims, and if there's a credible threat, he'll handle it according to the law. But Mrs. Whitfield, I want to be clear. You're here as a citizen seeking justice, not as an old flame seeking rekindling. Do we understand each other?" Delilah's mask slipped for just a moment, irritation flashing across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by gracious acceptance. "Of course, Mrs. Brennan. I'm a married woman. My husband is everything to me." The lie was so smooth, Clara almost believed it. Over the next week, Colt investigated Delilah's claims with Clara at his side. They interviewed people who'd been in town 6 years ago, people Delilah had stolen from or betrayed. The list was long and bitter, but most of those people had moved on, rebuilt their lives. None seemed likely to pursue elaborate revenge years later. Then Clara found the letters. She was searching through old territorial records in the church basement when she discovered them. A bundle of correspondence tucked into a file marked confidential. Letters from someone in Denver to someone in Redemption, detailing Delilah's movements, her habits, her routines. The handwriting was familiar, but Clara couldn't place it immediately. She brought them to Colt, who read them with increasing grimness. "These are surveillance reports," he said. "Professional. Someone's been watching her for months, planning something. Look at the signature," Clara pointed to the bottom of the last letter. A single initial, W. Colt went very still. "William Garrett." "The Garrett gang?" Clara's pulse quickened. "But you killed them." "I killed 3 brothers. But there was a 4th. William, the youngest. He was only 16 at the time, and the gang kept him hidden, used him for reconnaissance. When I brought down his brothers, he vanished. I assumed he'd given up the outlaw life. Colt's jaw clenched. Apparently, I assumed wrong. The pieces fell into place with horrible clarity. William Garrett blamed Colt for destroying his family. But Colt was too dangerous to attack directly. So William had chosen a different target. Someone Colt had once cared about. Someone whose death could be blamed on Colt's failure to protect her. "It's a trap," Clara said. "He brought her here to draw you out. He's going to try to kill her and make you watch, make you fail as a protector, the way you couldn't protect." She trailed off, realizing the deeper manipulation. "The way I couldn't protect Delilah the first time," Colt finished grimly. "When she robbed the town and I couldn't stop her. He's weaponizing my past failures." They found Delilah at the boarding house and told her everything. To her credit, she paled genuinely, fear replacing her usual calculated charm. "What do we do?" she asked, and for the first time, Clara heard real vulnerability in her voice. "We set a trap of our own," Colt said. "Use you as bait to draw him out." "No," Clara interjected. "We use both of you as bait. He wants to hurt Colt through someone he cares about. Let him think he's succeeding." The plan was dangerous and required trust, something in short supply between the three of them. But over the next 2 days, they prepared. Delilah would make a show of staying at Colt and Clara's house, suggesting she'd seduced her way back into the Marshal's life. William Garrett wouldn't be able to resist such a perfect opportunity. Clara hated every moment of the charade. Watching Delilah play the devoted old flame, seeing her touch Colt's arm with familiar ease, hearing her laugh at his comments with practiced intimacy, it scraped Clara's nerves raw. But she played her part too, the betrayed wife who stormed out and took a room at the boarding house, creating the perfect scenario for an attack. On the third night, William made his move. Clara was positioned in the darkness outside the house, rifle ready. When she saw the figure approaching through the shadows, young, lean, moving with deadly purpose toward the lit window where Colt and Delilah sat visible inside. William Garrett raised his rifle, aiming at the window. Clara's mind raced. If she fired now, she might miss, might give him time to shoot. If she waited too long, Colt or Delilah could die. She made her choice. "William Garrett," she called out clearly, her rifle trained on his center mass. "Put down the gun, or I will drop you where you stand." William spun, his rifle swinging toward her. Clara's training took over. Exhale, squeeze, fire. Her shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. His rifle discharged into the air as he fell. Colt burst from the house, gun drawn, with Tom Fletcher and 2 deputies right behind him. They secured William quickly, his wounded shoulder bleeding, but not life-threatening. "You shot the wrong person," William spat at Clara as they cuffed him. "You're protecting a snake. Delilah Reed destroyed this town, destroyed my family's chances at real work here before we turned to crime. She's the real villain." "Maybe," Clara said quietly, "but attempted murder is attempted murder, regardless of the victim's character. You'll face trial for what you tried to do, not what she did." As they hauled William away, Delilah emerged from the house, her carefully composed mask finally cracking. "Thank you," she said to Clara, and for once, the words sounded genuine. "You saved my life even though you hate me. That's more than I deserve." "I don't hate you," Clara replied truthfully. "I pity you. You had a good man's love and you threw it away for money. That must be a lonely way to live." Delilah flinched as if struck. She looked at Colt, who stood beside Clara with his hand on her waist. and something like genuine regret crossed her features. "He was wasted on me," she said softly. "I hope you know what you have, Mrs. Brennan." "I do," Clara said simply. "Every single day." Delilah left Redemption the next morning, returning to Denver and her husband. Clara stood with Colt on their porch, watching the stage carry her away. "Do you have any regrets?" Clara asked. Colt pulled her close, his chin resting on her head. "Only that I wasted time on an illusion when reality turned out to be so much better." He turned her in his arms, his gray eyes soft. Delilah was a fantasy, beautiful, refined, perfect on the surface. "You're real. You fight beside me, challenge me, save my life and others without hesitation. You're messy and brave and stubborn, and I love every imperfect, perfect thing about you." Clara smiled, rising on her toes to kiss him. Smooth talker. "Just honest," he murmured against her lips. "Together?" "Together," she agreed. "Always." The Comanche moon. Summer blazed across Montana with relentless heat, turning the grasslands golden and the air thick as honey. Clara was riding fence lines with Colt, checking for damage from the latest storm, when they saw the smoke signals rising from the eastern ridge. Colt reined justice in immediately, his entire body going tense. "That's Comanche," he said quietly, reading the patterns of smoke with practiced eyes. "They're asking for a parley." Clara had heard stories about the Comanche, fierce warriors who'd been gradually pushed from their ancestral lands, forced onto reservations by the encroaching flood of white settlement. Tensions had been high for months, and there had been talk of war. "What do we do?" Clara asked, checking her rifle instinctively. "We answer," Colt replied. "The fact that they're asking for parley instead of attacking means they want to talk. That's good. But Clara," he met her eyes seriously, "I need you to stay in town for this. Negotiations can go wrong fast, and you need someone you trust watching your back," Clara interrupted. "I'm coming with you, Colt. You know as well as I do that having a woman present often eases tensions, shows peaceful intent." She could see him calculating, weighing risks. Finally, he nodded. "Stay close to me. Don't speak unless spoken to directly. Not because I'm silencing you, but because some of the warriors are traditional and might take offense if protocols aren't followed." And Clara, his hand covered hers. "If I tell you to run, you run. No arguments, no hesitation. Promise me." "I promise," Clara said, though they both knew it was a promise she'd break if it meant saving his life. They rode to the designated meeting place, a clearing near the river, where tribal parley had been held for generations. A group of Comanche warriors waited, mounted on painted horses, their bearing proud despite the hardships their people had endured. At the center sat a man Clara recognized from Colt's descriptions. Running Bear, a chief known for both his fierce defense of his people and his attempts at peace. Beside him sat a younger warrior whose face bore a distinctive scar across one eyebrow. Clara's breath caught as she realized this was the man who'd marked Colt years ago, the one who'd chosen to scar instead of kill, the warrior who'd recognized honor in her husband. Colt raised his hand in the traditional greeting, and Running Bear returned it. The chief spoke in Comanche, and the scarred warrior, his son, Clara realized, translated into English. "Marshal Brennan, you come in peace, as we do. This is good. We must speak of difficult matters." "I'm listening," Colt replied, his voice respectful. "The white men push farther onto our lands," Running Bear continued through his son's translation. "They take water, kill game, break treaties. The young warriors grow angry. They speak of war, of driving all white men from our hunting grounds. He paused, his weathered face grave. I am old. I have seen war. It brings only death to my people. But I cannot stop the young warriors forever, unless things change. What changes do you need? Colt asked carefully. The negotiation that followed was complex and delicate. Running Bear wanted the white settlers to respect the boundary lines established by treaty, specifically to stop diverting the river that fed Comanche lands, and to cease hunting the buffalo that sustained the tribe. In return, the Comanche would guarantee safe passage through their territory and peace with the white settlements. Clara listened carefully, noticing things Colt might have missed. The way the younger warriors' hands tightened on their weapons when certain grievances were mentioned. The barely concealed desperation in Running Bear's eyes. These people were starving, being systematically destroyed, and they were choosing negotiation over justified violence. That took a kind of courage Clara deeply respected. When Running Bear asked Colt what he could promise, Clara saw her husband's internal struggle. He was a lawman, not a governor. His authority had limits. But he also understood that failure here meant war, and war meant death on both sides, including innocent people in redemption. I can't make promises for all white men, Colt said honestly, but I can promise that I'll enforce the treaty boundaries as law. Any settler who crosses those lines or diverts that water will be arrested and prosecuted. I'll personally ensure the buffalo are protected within treaty lands. Anyone caught hunting them illegally will face my guns. Running Bear studied him for a long moment. You are one man, Marshal. Can one man hold back the flood of his people's greed? No, Colt admitted, but I can try. And I don't stand alone, he gestured to Clara. My wife rides with me. My deputies stand with me. The good people of redemption stand with me. We're not all greedy, Running Bear. Some of us believe in honoring our word. The scarred warrior leaned forward, speaking directly in heavily accented English. You speak truth, Marshal. I saw this in you when we fought. You could have killed me then, but chose mercy. You are man of honor. He looked at Clara. Your woman has warrior's eyes. She would fight for her people, yes? Clara met his gaze steadily. I would fight for what's right, she said carefully, which means honoring treaties and protecting those who can't protect themselves. Your people have been wronged. My husband and I will work to right those wrongs within the law. Running Bear conferred with his warriors in rapid Comanche. Finally, he nodded. We agree to your terms, Marshal Brennan. We will watch. If you keep your word, there will be peace. If you fail... He didn't need to finish the sentence. The parley ended with a ceremonial exchange. Colt gave Running Bear his word as a lawman, sealed with a clasp of forearms. The chief gave Colt a small medicine pouch, blessed by their shaman, meant to protect a warrior in battle. You will need this, Running Bear said through his son. The white men will hate you for defending us. They will call you traitor, Indian lover. They will threaten you and yours, but you are man of honor, and honor comes with cost. As they rode back to redemption, Clara saw the weight of responsibility settling heavier on Colt's shoulders. This is going to be hard, he said quietly. There are powerful men who want those lands, that water. They're not going to accept treaty enforcement kindly. Then we fight them too, Clara replied firmly. The law is the law, Colt. That's what you've always stood for. We don't abandon principle because it becomes inconvenient. He looked at her with such love, it made her chest ache. How did I get so lucky? You didn't, Clara replied with a small smile. You got me through forced marriage to prevent a war, and I'm grateful every day for that war that never happened. The trouble came faster than they'd expected. Within a week, 3 ranchers showed up at the jail, demanding Colt explain why he was siding with savages against his own kind. I'm siding with the law, Colt replied, his voice dangerously quiet. There are treaty boundaries. You cross them, you face prosecution. Simple as that. Treaties can be renegotiated, snarled Marcus Hendricks, the wealthiest rancher in the territory. Those Comanche have more land than they can use. We need the water, Brennan. Our cattle are dying. Then dig wells on your own land, Clara interjected, from where she sat reviewing paperwork. Don't steal from people who were here first. Hendricks' face purpled. This doesn't concern you, woman. Go home and leave men's business to men. Clara stood slowly, her hand resting casually on the revolver at her hip, a gesture that wasn't lost on anyone present. I'm the marshal's deputy, she said coolly, a position Colt had officially granted her 2 months ago, which means this is exactly my business. And Mr. Hendricks, if you violate treaty lands, I'll arrest you myself. The threat hung in the air. Hendricks looked to Colt, expecting the marshal to rein in his wife. Instead, Colt stood beside Clara, united front. You heard the deputy, Colt said. The law applies to everyone, regardless of skin color or bank account. Now I suggest you gentlemen leave before I find a reason to lock you up for threatening a peace officer. They left, but Clara could see the rage in their eyes. This wasn't over. That night, as Clara and Colt lay in bed, she traced the old scars on his chest, a roadmap of his violent life. They're going to come for us, she said quietly. Hendricks and his allies. They can't let this stand. I know. Colt caught her hand, brought it to his lips. I can still back down. Tell Running Bear I can't enforce the treaties. Let things go back to how they were. And start a war with the Comanche? Clara finished, because that's what will happen if we break our word. The young warriors will see it as final proof that white men can't be trusted, and they'll strike back. Blood will flow on both sides. At least it wouldn't be our blood, Colt murmured, but there was no conviction in his words. That's not how you think, Clara replied firmly. You've never chosen safety over justice. Don't start now because I'm in the equation. She shifted to look into his eyes. I chose this life, Colt. I chose you, knowing full well what that meant. I'm not asking for an easier path. I'm asking to walk the hard one beside you. He pulled her down for a kiss that was both tender and desperate. If they hurt you because of my choices, then they'll face me, Clara interrupted, and they'll learn that I'm not the soft town wife they think I am. You made sure of that when you taught me to shoot, to fight, to stand my ground. I created a warrior, Colt said with a mixture of pride and concern. You revealed one, Clara corrected. She was always there. You just gave her permission to exist. The attack came 2 weeks later, in the dark hours before dawn. Clara woke to the sound of breaking glass and the acrid smell of smoke. Colt was already moving, gun in hand, pulling her from the bed. Fire, he said tersely. Multiple points. This is coordinated. They fought their way downstairs, but the house was already engulfed, flames licking up the walls with horrifying speed. Colt kicked open the back door, and they stumbled into the yard, directly into the arms of Marcus Hendricks and 5 of his ranch hands, all armed. "Should have left when you had the chance, Brennan," Hendricks said, his gun trained on Colt's chest. "Now you'll burn with your house, and the town will elect someone who understands whose side to be on." "Oh, wait. You'll hang for this," Colt replied, his voice deadly calm, despite the gun pointed at him. "Attempted murder of a lawman. That's federal." "Who's gonna testify?" Hendricks laughed. "By the time anyone gets here, you'll be dead and we'll be miles away. Your little wife, too. Shame about her. She was pretty. Should have stayed in her place." The rage that swept through Clara was ice-cold and clarifying. These men thought her weak, thought her helpless, thought her nothing more than collateral damage. They were about to learn differently. She'd concealed a derringer in her nightgown, a habit Colt had insisted on after the Maddox incident. In one smooth motion, she drew and fired at the nearest ranch hand. Her shot took him in the thigh, and he went down screaming. The moment of chaos was all they needed. Colt's gun barked twice, dropping 2 more men. Clara dove behind the water trough, reloading her derringer while bullets whined overhead. She heard Colt's steady return fire, the professional calm of a man who'd been in countless gunfights. But it was 6 against 2, and they were pinned down with a burning house at their backs and murderers in front. Then the night erupted with new gunfire, from different angles, different positions. Clara risked a glance and saw figures emerging from the darkness. Comanche warriors, led by Running Bear's scarred son, their rifles trained on Hendricks and his men. "Drop weapons," the scarred warrior commanded in his accented English, "or die where you stand." Hendricks and his remaining men froze, suddenly surrounded by a force they hadn't anticipated. The ranchers dropped their guns, hands raised. Tom Fletcher arrived minutes later with half the town behind him. They'd seen the fire and come running. As the deputy arrested Hendricks and his men, Running Bear's son approached Colt and Clara. "We watch," he explained simply. "Father say protect man of honor. We see fire, we come." His dark eyes held respect. "You keep word, Marshal. We keep ours." Colt clasped the warrior's forearm in the traditional grit. "Thank you. You saved our lives." "Debt repaid," the warrior replied. "You showed mercy once. Now we show same." He looked at their burning house, already collapsing into glowing embers. "You need place to stay. Come to our camp. You are welcome among us." As the Comanche warriors melted back into the night, Clara stood beside Colt, watching their home burn. Everything they owned was going up in flames. Clothes, furniture, the small treasures they'd accumulated during their marriage. "We'll rebuild," Colt said quietly, his arm around her waist. "Better, stronger." Clara leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the solid strength of his presence. "We already did that once," she replied. "We can do it again, together." "Together," Colt agreed. And as the sun rose over the ashes of their home, painting the sky in shades of promise, Clara knew that whatever came next, they would face it as they'd faced everything else. Side by side, partners in every sense of the word. The house could burn, the threats could come, but what they'd built together, the love, the trust, the unbreakable partnership, that was fireproof. That would endure. The final accounting. Autumn came to Montana with a painter's palette of gold and crimson, the air crisp with the promise of winter. Clara and Colt had rebuilt their house with help from the town and, surprisingly, from Running Bear's people. Comanche warriors working alongside white settlers in a display of cooperation that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Clara was teaching at the schoolhouse, now expanded to include both white and Comanche children. When the telegram arrived, Tom Fletcher brought it, his face grave. "It's from the territorial governor," he said quietly, handing it to Clara, marked urgent. Clara read it with growing unease. "Marshal Brennan, stop accusations of corruption and treason filed by Marcus Hendricks' allies. Stop formal investigation ordered. Stop federal marshals arriving weekend. Stop surrender badge and weapon pending inquiry. Stop." Her hands shook slightly as she passed the telegram to Tom. "Where's Colt?" "Out at the reservation, delivering supplies." Tom's jaw clenched. "Mrs. Brennan, this is bad. Hendricks is connected. His cousin's a senator. His brother-in-law sits on the territorial court. They're gonna twist everything the marshal did to look like he was taking bribes from the Comanche, that he let criminals go in exchange for favors." "That's insane," Clara said hotly. "Colt is the most honest man in 3 territories. Everyone knows that." "Honest doesn't matter when powerful men want you gone," Tom replied grimly. "They're building a case. False witnesses, forged documents. I've seen it before. They mean to destroy him, Mrs. Brennan. And if they can't beat him legally, they'll arrange an accident before the federal marshals arrive." Clara's mind raced. She'd watched Colt face down killers, survive ambushes, weather every threat with unwavering courage. But this was different. This was the law itself being twisted against him. And even the most relentless lawman couldn't fight the entire system, unless he didn't fight alone. "Gather everyone," Clara said, decision crystallizing. "Everyone who owes Colt Brennan their lives, their homes, their safety. Every person he's protected, every family he's saved. We're calling in every favor, every debt. If they want to destroy him, they'll have to go through all of us." When Colt returned that evening, he found their rebuilt home filled with people. Townspeople crowded into every room, spilling onto the porch. Running Bear and a delegation of Comanche elders sat at the kitchen table. Tom Fletcher stood by the fireplace with a stack of documents. And in the center of it all stood Clara, organizing chaos into strategy with the competence of a field general. "What's going on?" Colt asked, though his eyes had already found the telegram on the table. "We're going to war," Clara replied simply. "Not with guns this time, with truth." Over the next week, they built their defense. Tom gathered testimony from dozens of people Colt had helped. Families protected from outlaws, women saved from abuse, children rescued from danger. Running Bear provided documentation of every interaction between Colt and the Comanche, proving there had been no bribes, no corruption, only a lawman honoring legitimate treaties. Clara rode to neighboring towns, interviewing witnesses, collecting evidence of Hendricks' actual crimes, the water theft, the treaty violations, the attempted murder. She was tireless, driven by the absolute certainty that she would not let corrupt men destroy the man she loved. But their opponents weren't idle either. Rumors spread like wildfire that Colt had taken Comanche gold, that he'd murdered white settlers at Running Bear's request, that he was planning to help the tribes launch attacks on settlements. The lies were outrageous, but repetition gave them the weight of truth in some minds. 3 days before the federal marshals were due to arrive, Clara received a visitor, a well-dressed man in expensive Eastern clothes, claiming to represent Hendricks' interests. Mrs. Brennan, he said smoothly, my clients are prepared to be generous. Drop this crusade, convince your husband to resign quietly, and you'll both be given safe passage out of Montana, plus $10,000 to start fresh elsewhere. Fight this, and I guarantee he'll hang for treason. The evidence is already in place. Clara studied the man with cold eyes. You're offering us blood money to let corrupt men win. I'm offering you a chance to live, he corrected. Your husband made enemies, Mrs. Brennan, powerful enemies. They will destroy him, and you too if you stand beside him. Take the money. Start over somewhere else. Forget this ever happened. For just a moment, Clara was tempted. They could run, leave this all behind, build a life somewhere the past couldn't touch them. It would be easier, safer, saner than fighting a battle they might not win. Then she remembered Colt's face when he'd first called her a person worth more than a bargaining chip. The way he'd taught her to shoot, to ride, to stand tall. The countless times he'd chosen justice over convenience, right over easy. The man he'd become because someone finally believed in him. Tell your clients, Clara said clearly, that Colt Brennan doesn't run from fights, and neither does his wife. We'll see them in court, and we'll see them in hell if necessary. Now get out of my house before I demonstrate exactly how well my husband taught me to shoot. The man left, and Clara allowed herself a moment of trembling before steadying herself. She'd just declared war on some of the most powerful men in the territory. There was no going back now. The federal marshals arrived on schedule. 3 hard men from Washington who'd seen every kind of corruption the frontier could produce. The lead marshal, a gray-haired veteran named Hayes, interviewed Colt first. Clara wasn't allowed in the room, but she paced outside with Tom and a dozen townspeople who'd come to support their marshal. Hours passed. When the door finally opened, Colt emerged looking drained but steady. They want to interview you next, he said quietly to Clara. They're asking about our marriage, about whether you're covering for me out of misguided loyalty. Let them ask, Clara replied firmly. She entered the interview room with her head high, ready for battle. Marshal Hayes studied her with shrewd eyes. Mrs. Brennan, I'll be direct. Your husband is accused of serious crimes. Corruption, conspiracy, possibly treason. These are not small matters. I'm aware, Clara said calmly. I'm also aware that the men making these accusations are the actual criminals, men who tried to murder us in our sleep when legal intimidation failed. That's a serious counter-accusation. Hayes noted. Do you have proof? I have everything, Clara replied. Testimony from the men who participated, proving Hendricks ordered the attack. Documentation of treaty violations. Evidence of water theft and illegal hunting. Medical records from the doctor who treated the wounded ranch hand I shot in self-defense. And I have this. She placed a leather journal on the table. Colt's personal log, where he'd meticulously documented every interaction with the Comanche, every decision made, every treaty enforcement action. It was damning in its honesty, showing a man struggling to do right in an impossible situation, but never once compromising his principles for personal gain. My husband is many things, Clara continued. He's hard, he's dangerous, he's killed men without hesitation when the law required it. But he's never been corrupt. He's the most honest man I've ever known, Marshal Hayes. And if that honesty threatens powerful men who profit from lawlessness, then I'll spend the rest of my life fighting to protect it. Hayes read through the journal, his expression unreadable. Finally, he looked up. This is remarkably thorough documentation, almost as if he expected to be accused someday. He did, Clara admitted. He told me once that honest men in corrupt systems have to work twice as hard to prove their innocence. So he documented everything because he knew someday someone would try exactly this. The investigation took 3 more days. During that time, the federal marshals interviewed over 50 witnesses. They examined Hendricks' financial records, finding evidence of massive debts that would be solved by acquiring Comanche water rights. They investigated the fire that destroyed Clara and Colt's first home, finding testimony from a ranch hand willing to turn state's evidence against his employer in exchange for leniency. The facade Hendricks had built crumbled piece by piece. On the 4th day, Marshal Hayes called everyone together in Redemption's town hall. The room was packed. White settlers on one side, Comanche observers on the other, and Colt and Clara standing in the middle, hands joined. After thorough investigation, Hayes announced, his voice carrying authority, "I'm prepared to render findings. The accusations against Marshal Colt Brennan are without merit. Not only did I find no evidence of corruption, I found overwhelming evidence of a lawman doing his duty despite significant personal cost and danger." Relief swept through Clara so intensely she nearly swayed. Colt's hand tightened on hers, the only sign of his own emotional turmoil. Furthermore, Hayes continued, "I'm filing federal charges against Marcus Hendricks and his associates for attempted murder of a federal law enforcement officer, conspiracy to commit fraud, treaty violations, and perjury. Warrants will be issued today." The room erupted, cheers from Colt's supporters, angry protests from Hendricks' allies. Hayes raised his hand for silence. "I want to say something else," the federal marshal continued. "I've been doing this job for 23 years. I've seen every kind of frontier lawman, the brutal, the corrupt, the indifferent. Marshal Brennan is none of those things. He's what this territory needs, a man who enforces the law without favor, who protects all citizens regardless of race, who refuses to bend principle for convenience. If I had 100 marshals like him, the frontier would be a civilized place within a decade." He turned to face Colt directly. "The territorial governor has authorized me to offer you a promotion, Marshal Brennan, regional marshal, overseeing law enforcement for 6 territories. It comes with a significant raise in pay and authority to appoint your own deputies." Clara felt Colt stiffen beside her. This was recognition he'd earned, authority he'd never sought, but certainly deserved. She waited for him to accept, to take the next logical step in a legendary career. Instead, Colt shook his head. "I appreciate the offer, Marshal Hayes, but I'm going to decline." Shock rippled through the room. Clara turned to stare at her husband. "Colt!" He looked at her, his gray eyes soft. "I spent years chasing justice across territories, moving from town to town, never staying long enough to build anything real. Then I met you, and for the first time, I understood what I was really fighting for. Not just law and order, but community, home, family." He turned back to Hayes. "Redemption needs a marshal who stays, who knows every family, who's invested in the long-term peace of this place. I can't do that from a regional office, traveling constantly. I want to stay here with my wife, protecting the home we've built together." Clara's eyes stung with tears. She'd been prepared to follow him anywhere, to support whatever choice he made. That he'd chosen her, chosen them, chosen the life they'd built together over career advancement. It was more than she dared to hope for. Besides, Colt added with a slight smile. My deputy here is the best I've ever worked with. I'd be a fool to leave when I finally found a real partner. He'd said partner, not assistant or helper. Equal. Always equal. Hayes chuckled. I can't say I'm surprised. I've watched you two together this week. You're a team in the truest sense. He extended his hand to Colt. Then I'll leave redemption in capable hands, Marshal. Just know that if you ever change your mind, the offer stands. After Hayes left with Hendricks and his men in custody, redemption threw a celebration. The town square filled with people. White settlers and Comanche mixing freely now. Children playing together, regardless of skin color. The beginning of something that might actually deserve the name peace. Clara stood with Colt on the edge of the celebration, watching the town they'd fought so hard to protect. No regrets? She asked. About turning down the promotion? Colt pulled her close, his arms around her waist. Not a single one. I've spent my life proving I was good enough, strong enough, incorruptible enough. But none of that mattered until I had someone to share it with. You taught me that being the best marshal means nothing if I'm the loneliest man. I choose us, Clara. Today, tomorrow, always. She turned in his arms, rising on her toes to kiss him. I love you, Colt Brennan. Every stubborn, principled, impossibly noble part of you. And I love you, he murmured against her lips. My warrior, my partner, my home. Running Bear approached them, his weathered face creased in a rare smile. Through his son's translation, he said, You did good thing, Marshal. Choose family over ambition. This is wisdom. He presented Clara with a beaded necklace, beautiful and intricate. For warrior woman. You fight for people not your own. Honor treaties others break. This is gift of respect. Clara accepted it with genuine emotion, placing it around her neck. I'm honored, Running Bear. Thank you for teaching me that justice means protecting everyone, not just people who look like me. The celebration continued into the night. Clara danced with Colt under the stars, surrounded by the community they'd helped build, the peace they'd fought to maintain, the future they'd secured through stubborn refusal to compromise what was right. Later, in their rebuilt home, lying in bed with moonlight streaming through the window, Clara traced the scar above Colt's eyebrow, her favorite landmark on his face. Tell me the truth, she said quietly. Are you really happy? You gave up so much to stay here with me. Colt caught her hand, kissing her palm. I gave up nothing that mattered. A title? Authority over strangers in distant towns? That's not happiness, Clara. This, he gestured around their bedroom, at the life visible through the window. This is happiness. Waking up beside you, teaching you to track, working together to solve problems, building something that lasts. You're surprisingly romantic for a man who shoots people for a living, Clara teased, though her voice was thick with emotion. Only when they deserve it, Colt replied, his expression turning serious. And only because I have something worth protecting now. You made me more than just a lawman, Clara. You made me a whole person. She kissed him then, deep and claiming, and felt his response in every line of his body. They made love slowly, tenderly, a reaffirmation of vows spoken in desperation and renewed in joy. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, Clara thought about the journey that had brought them here. Offered to prevent a war, forced into marriage by desperate circumstances, she'd expected at best a tolerable arrangement, and at worst, a lifetime of regret. Instead, she'd found partnership, purpose, passion. She'd discovered her own strength, her own courage, her own capacity for fierce, unwavering love. And she'd found a man who saw all of that and loved her not despite it, but because of it. "What are you thinking?" Colt asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "That I was offered to prevent a war," Clara replied slowly. "And I rose as the bride of the Wild West's most relentless lawman alive. But more importantly, I rose as myself, fully myself, strong and capable and loved exactly as I am. Not just loved," Colt corrected softly. "Cherished, respected, needed. You're the better half of this partnership, Clara. Don't ever doubt that." "We're both the better half," she replied. "That's what makes it work. Together." "Together," Colt agreed, and pulled her closer as they drifted toward sleep. Years later, when people told the story of Marshal Colt Brennan and his remarkable wife, they would speak of gunfights and investigations, of Comanche treaties and corrupt politicians brought down. They would talk about the couple who'd rebuilt after fire, who'd stood firm when powerful men demanded they bend, who'd proven that honor and love weren't just ideals, but achievable realities. But the true story was simpler and more profound. Two people, forced together by circumstance, chose each other freely every single day afterward. They built a life of purpose and partnership, where strength and gentleness coexisted, where justice and mercy walked hand in hand, where love grew not from perfect beginnings, but from imperfect people, choosing to be better together than they could ever be apart. Clara had been offered to prevent a war, but what she'd gained was so much more than peace. She'd found her place, her purpose, her partner, and she'd discovered that sometimes the greatest victories aren't won on battlefields or in courtrooms, but in the quiet moments when two people look at each other and recognize home. Together, they'd faced outlaws and corrupt politicians, fire and false accusations, the darkness of the past and the uncertainty of the future. And together, they would continue to face whatever came next, because that's what partnerships meant. That's what love meant. That's what choosing each other, day after day, moment after moment, truly looked like. Together, always together. Until the stars fell from the Montana sky, and the rivers ran dry, and time itself forgot their names, they would stand together, two souls forged in adversity into something unbreakable, something beautiful, something worth every sacrifice and every struggle. They had been offered to prevent a war, but they had become something far greater, living proof that even in the Wild West's harshest landscape, love could not just survive, but thrive, transforming forced obligation into freely chosen devotion, weakness into strength, strangers into soulmates. And that, more than any legend of gunfights won or villains defeated, was the true story of Marshal Colt Brennan and his warrior wife Clara, two people who proved that the greatest adventure was simply choosing to love each other well, every single day, together. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Clara and Colt's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.